Just a few years ago, I was scared to leave the house and walk to the end of my driveway. As a type 1 diabetic, low blood sugar scared me more than just about anything else in life. And part of that reason is because I almost died on a few different occasions, so multiple times, from low blood sugars. Urgent lows just catching me off guard, coming out of nowhere. And yesterday I did a presentation for a type 1 diabetes nonprofit organization on type 1 diabetes and exercise as someone who is now an Ironman. And I don't fully understand how I went from being scared to leave the house to completing an Ironman, but I can tell you that looking back, there were three things that stood out to me as big stepping stones for reducing my own anxiety about low blood sugars. Now, I want to lead with this. Anxiety is not gone, but a big part of this is doing it scared. And to this day, that is still part of my process. Now, that being said, in this presentation I gave yesterday, I had the unique experience to do a Q&A after my presentation. Now, as a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist and best-selling author with type 1 diabetes, I was asked to come present and educate, but this unique experience allowed me to interact with the crowd and actually answer their specific questions. And there was one question that really stood out to me because it was so tied to my own experiences with diabetes. And that was an individual who had a 7-year-old child that had type 1 diabetes or has type 1 diabetes. And they asked me how, of course, to strategize with blood sugars, insulin on board, how to keep everything stable so that their kid can be a kid. But then we got a level deeper. And this individual wanted to know how they could help their 7-year-old child with type 1 diabetes to move past the anxiety that I spoke of. And this person mentioned that if I was scared to go to the end of the driveway as an adult, how could he support his 7-year-old kid? Because he's going to experience lows. And I thought this was a fantastic question. So I wanted to take some time to really dig into this. I gave him my 3 pieces that I'm going to give you, the 3 frameworks, but I'm going to dig a bit deeper today because I have the chance to actually think about it and organize my thoughts a bit more. So if you don't know who I am, my name's Matt Van de Vecht. I am a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. I speak around the nation on type 1 diabetes and exercise and nutrition. I wrote a best-selling book on the topic as well called The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, but today I want to go into the mental health side of things, because I believe it's something that's not covered often enough. And it's something that I have immense experience with as the patient. And so I hope that this brings you some hope. I hope that there is clarity, and I hope that there is inspiration, that life can be still lived to the fullest with type 1 diabetes, even in the presence of fear. So with that being said, let's jump in. Now, I do want to give you a brief overview of my presentation. In my presentation, I talk a lot about how exercise is a tool, not something to be feared. In fact, one of my opening statements is that if I asked you to tell me about exercise being good or bad, you'd probably say good, but your actions likely don't follow that. Most of us are fearful of exercise to some degree, right? Because exercise can bring on these sudden low blood sugars, especially if there's insulin on board. So it's this big uncertainty, the fear of mystery fluctuations of blood sugars that most people are being held back by. They're afraid to exercise because they know that blood sugars can be more difficult to manage when exercising. So we either avoid it or we run our blood sugars high in order to avoid the lows while exercising. And a big part of my presentation is talking about how to use blood sugar formulas to manipulate blood sugars. In fact, in chapter 5 and 7 of my book, you'll find a lot of the instructions on how to do that and more guiding posts. But beyond that, I think it's also really helpful to understand there's different types of exercises. There's different strategic ways to introduce foods. There's different adjustments with insulin that you can make. But the core principle really is a mindset thing. See, if you look at exercise as something to be scared of, it's inherently more difficult. And for me, it wasn't until I saw exercise as a tool to manage my blood sugars that it became more of a constant, more of a habit in my routine, right? So that's kind of the premise of my talk, how we get into it. But this question really just, I love the perspective that it forces, right? That there is hope, but we don't know how to get there. What is the outcome? Outcome is to be able to exercise freely, to live spontaneously, to do what you want with diabetes, and to not have to think about blood sugars quite as often, right? Or be interrupted by them. So either you're thinking about it because you're nervous, you're hyper aware, and you're babysitting your blood sugars, which does enable you to keep relative control over your blood sugars. And if you're watching your CGM like a hawk, or you're testing your blood sugars all the time, you're going to know when it starts to drop or spike, and you can make micromanagement decisions to fix that, or at the very least redirect the blood sugars, right? But it requires that you are distracted, right? It's very involved in that process, and I've done that. It works, but at what cost? You kind of lose your quality of life, your peace of mind. The other side of that, of course, is just to go fly by the seat of your pants and hope it goes well, which of course it doesn't. Diabetes, if it's ignored, demands your attention. You will have a low or a high, and it's going to pull you out of the moment anyways. It's just kind of which battle do you want to fight? But I like to invite you to think that there's a third option, and that's to formulate your strategies. The diabetes is one giant math equation. And if you can figure out the equation for you, because we're all different, you'll have more predictable blood sugars. It's simply how it is. That being said, anxiety is this underlying factor that many of us don't consider as part of the equation. See, anxiety is going to drive different behaviors based on the circumstances. I'll give you an example. If I'm at 150 and I go out to exercise, I am less likely to bring sugar with me. Now I do, because it's one of my rules, but if I'm at 80 and I'm about to exercise, you better believe bringing sugar is part of the plan, right? It's part of the subconscious plan. I'm scared of going low. Now, this also impacts things like our pre-bolus. So if I'm at 85, I'm less likely to give myself a full pre-bolus for lunch, wait a full 15 or 20 minutes before I take my first bite, because I'm nervous about going low. Versus if I'm at 120, 130, 150, I might give it a little extra. I'm overly confident that I'm not going to go low, right? Because there's this huge buffer. So anxiety, again, plays a huge role in your subconscious decision-making frameworks. In fact, how I want you to imagine type 1 diabetes and anxiety is like, or I will just say mental health, right? Because anxiety is just the negative side, but mental health in general, because it can be positives as well. Your mental health and type 1 diabetes, it's like inseparable roommates. Like, you cannot separate them. If you try to separate them, chaos ensues. There's sadness. They'll find a way to get back in together. These best friends, so to speak, right? If you are mentally weak, but you know what to do for your diabetes, you're less likely to do the things you need to do because you're unwilling to. If you're mentally strong, but you don't know what to do with your diabetes, you'll do things, but you'll do them blindly. You're like, I'm trying my hardest. Why isn't it working, right? They have to go hand in hand, and they have to be together. They're both part of the same puzzle, part of the same equation. Now, today I want to talk to you about the 3 pillars that I discussed with this gentleman who was in the crowd during my presentation, and how ultimately they helped me go from scared, fearful, and anxious to an Ironman athlete who is now confident in management, who still has anxiety, but will do it scared anyways. Now, pillar number 1 is that environment shapes success or failure. I'm going to say this super bluntly, just so it's absolutely clear. If you surround yourself with losers, you're going to fall to their level. If you surround yourself with winners, you will rise to their level. Who you surround yourself with determines the standards that you hold yourself to. Why? Because if you're surrounding yourself with losers, the second you start to do better, even just a little bit, you're like, holy cow, I'm amazing because I'm better than everyone I know, right? Even if you're not that amazing. Conversely, if you surround yourself with winners who are doing incredible things, like top dog kind of stuff, if you fall behind even a little bit, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst here. I need to step it up. Right? So you naturally will rise or fall to the level of your group, right? Of your friends, of your coworkers, of your family. So surrounding yourselves with winners will help you immensely subconsciously. It's this powerful thing. Now, this is actually twofold from my own life. One, I now surround myself with others who are high achievers, high performers, right? Both in business, in athletics, but also with diabetes. Believe it or not, my clients, and we have this thing called the Warriors Inner Circle and another thing called the Warriors Tribe Plus, but the Warriors Inner Circle is exactly that. It's an inner circle of high performers, of people who will not settle for less, who strive to continuously learn more and step up their game and innovate and research, learn more about other things other than just blood sugars. We're looking into heart health and cancer and brain health and sleep optimization. Fantastic group. They're amazing. But the other side of this is your family, your friends, and those who influence your subconscious behavior on a daily basis, right? So for me, that was my little sister. And Carlin, if you're watching this, shout out to you. So my little sister, she has type 1 diabetes as well. She was diagnosed a little after me, and that was one of the worst days of my life, worse than when I was diagnosed. And I'm trying not to get emotional here because I knew what she was getting into. I had already had it for like a year and a half or so, and I knew I could handle it when I was diagnosed. I was like, this sucks. I hate this. This is so unfair, but I can handle it. And when my little sister got diagnosed, I knew she could handle it, but I didn't want her to have to, right? And I was so frustrated. That was one of the first times in my life that I broke down in tears. I was living at college, which was about 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and I was bawling the whole way home when I got the phone call that she was diagnosed. And I mean, almost unsafe levels of tears. Like I couldn't see through my tears because I was crying so hard. And I mean, I shouldn't have been driving, but I needed to get to her. And I mean, I didn't think I was going to share this today. There's hard moments in life, and this was one of them. I got to my parents' house, which is where she was living at the time, and everybody was already there because I lived the furthest away at that point. I opened the door, and my sister and I locked eyes from across the room and just ran together and embraced. And I mean, instant dia-buddies, you know. You've never heard that term before. We call each other dia-besties, actually. It's like best friends, but you both have diabetes. And my little sister and I, we didn't have a ton in common. Like, we had enough in common growing up, but there's a bit of an age gap between us. And so the phases of life that we were in were always a little bit different until that day. And I hate that that's the thing that brought us together, but boy, did it bring us together. Anyways, flash forward quite a few years, about a little over a decade, actually. You know, we're both doing pretty good with diabetes, and there was a day where I had a rough day where I almost ceased to exist. Not by choice, a total accident, but it was an urgent low in a foreign country that totally took me by surprise. I didn't know what was going on. There's a whole story where I share a bit more about this. In fact, I'll put a link in the description. You can go watch the video. It's a whole training we made out of it because of the emergency situation that it turned into and the lessons that I learned from it. But ultimately, it put me in a spot where I was terrified of diabetes. And I was in a foreign country, so I flew home. And over the following months, I was so scared of lows, of insulin. I mean, I didn't take care of myself, and I got to a place where I was afraid to walk outside. I was afraid to leave the house, to walk to the end of the driveway, which in San Diego, our driveways aren't like a mile long like some of yours are, right? It's like 30 feet. So I was scared to walk 30 feet outside for fear of a low. It's like, I know activity, movement can bring lows. I was scared. And it got to a point where I was saying no to family events. I even said no to a free trip to Portugal. So way, way, way back in the day, I used to do like modeling and acting, and I was hired for a job in Portugal. They're going to pay for my flights, my hotels, and pay me on top of that. It sounded like a dream, almost vacation of a job, right? And I turned it down because I was like, there's no way I'm traveling by myself. I almost died last time I did that. No. And I was missing out on so much of life, and that's going to come up in pillar number 2 of what got me out of anxiety eventually. But what happened is I saw my sister daily, obviously, because at that time I was living at home, or I had moved back home because I was a mess. I couldn't live on my own anymore. And I saw my sister just handling it. You know, she'd have an urgent low while we're walking around in the mall or getting food, and she's just drinking a juice box and continuing on. And here I was terrified to get below 150. I was like, if I get below 150, I feel like I'm going to die, you know? And so surrounding myself with other people who are just doing it, who are experiencing the same things that I am, gave me hope. And it kind of reset my brain where I was like, hold on. I'm scared to go below 150. She's currently at 50 and she's fine, right? She doesn't feel good. Lows suck, but she's fine. And it was that reset that challenged my beliefs, my false beliefs, where I was like, so lows aren't just a guaranteed death sentence. Turns out you can survive them. Maybe I need to check myself. I think my brain is lying to me, which is a big part of what anxiety is. It's your brain blowing things out of proportion, right? It's trying to protect you from dangerous things, but oftentimes it just takes it way further than it actually needs to go. And this fear and this anxiety builds up on the inside, but you're like, if I step outside, I'm going to die, right? And that's how I felt. That's actually how I felt. I was like, if I walk for too long, my blood sugars are going to go into the negatives. I actually believed that my blood sugars would zero out and I would just fall over. Done. That's how bad it was with my anxiety. And this is also wild for me to talk about because I was somebody who had never even experienced anxiety before this. Part of me, I feel bad saying this now, I thought it was made up. I kind of thought that people who were anxious or fearful were just like weak. And then for me to be at the bottom of that totem pole where I was like, I can't leave the house, was like, ooh, wake up call. This stuff's real. PTSD, this is hard, right? As panic attacks daily. I actually have that in my diagnosis chart now that I've had panic attacks and panic attack disorder and PTSD. Oh, so fun seeing my medical charts updated after that appointment. But seeing my little sister, this is pillar number one, seeing my little sister just handle it really challenged my false beliefs. And so a lot of people who work with me directly and in our inner circle as well, we get our beliefs challenged all the time. And it's a beautiful environment for learning. They're very supportive, but if someone says something that might not be true, we lovingly challenge them. We're like, hey, is it possible that maybe this is not the way that you're seeing it? Maybe there's this new perspective you can view things from. And it allows us to grow, right? Because growth is uncomfortable. But when it comes from a loving, supportive position, especially in the right environment, that's the recipe for success. So ultimately, for pillar number one, I would say that we can summarize it with you become who you surround yourself with. The ones you watch, the ones you talk to, the ones you interact with. That is who you are becoming, subconsciously even. Now, number two, kind of in line with that, was the things that you tell yourself. So what you see, you begin to emulate. But pillar number two, it surrounds more of the mantras and the internal beliefs. So if I keep telling myself, I can't do this bad thing is going to happen, I start to believe those things. The things that you say, this is where the whole world of affirmations kind of gets its base from. If I start telling people, I am the kind of person that has bad blood sugars, I am the kind of person who has lows all the time, your brain actually starts to believe that. If you're like, I'm the kind of person that hates to work out, you're never going to enjoy a workout because your brain is subconsciously rewiring itself to hate workouts. And it's blocking anything that is in opposition to that because your brain wants to be correct about itself. So when I say that, if I start saying, I am the kind of person who likes to work out. Well, in order for that to be true, my brain has to find a way to justify that statement. Now, as soon as I said that, my brain didn't go to workouts with weights or bike rides. It went straight to hiking. So when I said, I am the kind of person who likes to work out or exercise, my brain was like, that's true. I do like to go hiking, right? So the words that you say are largely going to impact how you act. So when I was constantly telling myself that I was not safe, that I was going to go low, that my diabetes is just harder to manage, that life isn't worth living, because it did kind of get to that point at one time, multiple times, so I'm being real. Those are things that I start to believe, right? And a long time ago, many years actually, I had a discussion with a type 1 diabetic therapist who had an amazing phrase. And along these lines of trying to fight the fear of low blood sugars, they said of a helpful mantra that has stuck with me since then, which is, I have a 100% success rate in treating low blood sugars. And I thought, well, I am still here, so that's true. And I have a 100% success rate in treating low blood sugars. That's fantastic. I didn't realize I was doing so well, And so that was one thing that I found. And these mantras are everywhere. You can make up whatever mantra you want. When I was going through that hard time in my life, you guys know I used to wear a shirt that just said warrior. Now it says renegade warrior. And these are powerful statements that I believe about myself. I told myself I am a warrior when I was going through hard times, when I was having low blood sugars or rapidly dropping blood sugars. I would tell myself, I am a warrior. I'm going to be okay, right? And just these positive words that came out of my mouth or even just stayed in my head reminded me I was probably going to be okay, right? And that positive outlook also allows you to be a better critical thinker. When you shift to panic, your brain shuts off logic. So if you are dealing with anxiety like I did, remember that. The more you panic, the less logic your brain can give you. So if you're like, I don't know what to do, you're going to have a hard time finding the sugar. Where's the juice? I don't know. I forgot where I put it. That's what's going to happen. So the calmer you can stay, the easier it is for your brain to come up with a plan, to strategize, to think critically about the scenario. Now, that being said, looking at different mantras, it's the words you say about yourself, but it's also the actions that you take. So for me, a big part of that action was baby steps, moving in the right direction just a little bit, and challenging myself to do so. So looking at options that I had, I looked at fear as kind of a guidepost or a litmus test. It was like, okay, if I'm fearful of something, that's the direction I have to go in, right? If I'm scared of something like going down the driveway, the only way I'm going to work past that is what we call exposure therapy, is doing that thing. And I wanted to start small because honestly, I was terrified of these things. I needed to start small, so literally went outside to get the mail. It was like, okay, mail is like 10 feet. Go back, hey, I didn't die. Oh my gosh, whew, that was crazy, Then the next day, or maybe later in the day afternoon, I went to the end of the driveway. I kid you not. And I need you just to stick with me for a second here. I literally carried a backpack with me to the end of the driveway. Keep in mind, this is like 30 feet. That was full of juice boxes and glucose tabs. That is how bad this was. I don't know what I was so scared of, maybe getting locked out and not having access to sugar, but I took a backpack with me to the end of the driveway. And if I'm being totally honest with you, it was moments like that that led me to disgust myself. I was disgusted in myself and in who I had become. I was the guy who used to be fearless. Like, I was the guy who literally has scuba dived with sharks. I've jumped out of planes for skydiving, traveled the world, probably been to like 36 to 40 countries, somewhere in there. Most of it solo. I was the fearless guy. That's what I was known for in college. And now I'm scared to go outside? And that disgust rooted even further because I watched my little sister cruising through life, doing her thing, not letting diabetes get in the way, and her big brother was too scared to go outside. Disgusted with myself. If I'm supposed to be the protector of my little sister, and she sees me cowering because I might have a low blood sugar, unacceptable. Unacceptable. Now, that's the standard that I held myself to. This is not me telling you that you're a coward or that you're unacceptable. If you feel that way, I say good, because I used it to my benefit. See, the challenge here is that until you feel more uncomfortable with your current moment than you do about the rate of change, you're going to stay in the current moment. In fact, I pulled this up. Let me get my notes. My sister, the one I'm talking about, actually texted this to me. She's reading my book right now and texted me a little excerpt. She said, like anything in life, you will continue to have, insert whatever issue, problem you're dealing with, until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of effort and change. In other words, if I am overweight, I'm going to remain overweight until I'm absolutely disgusted with or in pain because of that overweight status, and that pain has to be greater than the effort of going to the gym. So if going to the gym is harder to me in my perception of being overweight, I'm going to stay overweight until being overweight becomes harder than going to the gym. Then I will make the change. That's human nature. So understanding, I had finally reached a point where I was so disgusted in myself for letting it get this far, for being so fragile, that I had to make a change. I was so uncomfortable. I was so in pain that I had to make a change. And this is also where pillar 3 comes into play. With my strategy, baby steps were a huge part of it. Literally, it was like, walk to the end of the driveway. Okay, I'm still alive. Okay, walk around the block with my heavy backpack full of glucose. Okay, I'm still alive. And I actually brought people with me on those walks. How crazy is that? I mean, that's kind of that's where I was. All right. Taking baby steps. The final step for me, beyond exposure therapy, because I was like, hey, cool, I made it a block. I walked for 5 minutes, But you're like, Matt, how the heck did you get to be an Ironman when you were afraid to walk around the block? First of all, it took years. And in between those years was the development of what's called the 80-20 blood sugar formula. That's the reason I was able to do it with pure confidence in my blood sugars. Like, I knew they were going to be fine. And that's how I've maintained above 90% time in range for over 5.5 years consistently, while doing all the crazy stuff, building a business, raising a family, becoming an Ironman. It's possible. And I need you guys to know that. Okay. But in addition to the baby steps that I took, I used a process called negative visualization. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're imagining bad things, right? So I took this imagination drill that my coach actually walked me through. I hired a coach to help me through this time in my life. And ultimately, he was like, hey, you need to imagine the worst case scenario a year from now if nothing changes. Because nothing changes when nothing changes. So if nothing changes, you're just going to continue on that path, right? I was like, okay, so a year from now, nothing changes. I guess I've missed a few opportunities with work. I'm a bit of a burden to my family. That kind of sucks. And at this point, by the way, my family had lovingly pointed out that my personality had changed. Like, that's how different I was. So this negative visualization, okay, life looks a little different. It's definitely not getting better. It's getting worse because nothing has changed. I'm continuing to get this tunnel vision on like nothing else is safe. So I'm restricting myself. And I live a very routine life because I have to stay in my safety bubble. I don't love that. He was like, okay, about 10 years from now, what do your relationships look like? Has that burden impacted you anywhere else? And you really sink into it. Like, this is an exercise you have to really take your time in, kind of like a meditation. And I was like, oh my gosh, 10 years from now. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about this, because I remember vividly what that was like. The imagination from that exercise took over. And this is not what I would expect my wife to do, but just where my brain took me is that my family had given up on me, and they wouldn't do that either. But as somebody who was a burden, as somebody who saw themselves as a burden, as somebody who was scared to do anything, I imagined this future of myself 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, where I had no family. My wife had left me because I couldn't work, couldn't keep a job because too scared of blood sugars, right? Never got to raise a family, never got to fully reach my potential in life, never got to do anything fun. And I was alone with a cardboard table in an apartment that was infested and disgusting. And I was a shell of a human waiting to die. I imagined this horror movie of my future inside my head and realized that if nothing changes, nothing changes. In fact, it can only get worse. And then my coach, knowing that I was in this dark pit of depression, pulled me out of it and was like, all right, other side of that equation, best case scenario. you start making progress today. Baby steps. One little piece at a time. Small wins stack on top of each other. And day after day, month after month, year after year, you overcome these fears, this anxiety, these challenges. You grow stronger, you grow more confident. You not only get back to who you were, but you are better than who you ever were before. What does that feel like? What does that look like to you? It's like, oh my gosh, wait, there's hope? I can get out of this? And that was the moment where I decided I needed to do something. I needed to take action, because if I did not take action, that path was clear and it is not what I wanted for my life. If I did take action, if I did the uncomfortable thing that terrified me, there was hope. In fact, I want to challenge you right now. If there's something that makes you a little nervous, it might not be the same level of fear as I was for me. But if there's something that makes you a little nervous, just thinking about, as long as it's safe, I want you to look at that as a potential next step. Because oftentimes what I've found is that the things that make me nervous are the things that stand in the way for my progress. People ask me, why did you do an Ironman? We know it's incredibly dangerous with type 1 diabetes. It's insanely difficult. It's actually the world's most difficult single-day endurance event ever. Like, it's the hardest thing you can do. Why the heck would you do that, Matt? And while I have a lot of reasons for finishing the Ironman, I can tell you this: I signed up for it because it scared me. I'm proud to say that. I realized that fear is not something that stops us. It's a directional cue. It gives us an idea of the direction we should be going. The obstacle is not the end. The obstacle is the way. In fact, there's a book behind me right there by Ryan Holiday. Highly recommend it. The obstacle is the way. Understanding that is what allowed me to become an Ironman. It's what allowed me now to stand before you and tell you that I've raised a family, I've built a business, I've traveled the world again, and I'm living my best life. And it gets better every day. And it doesn't come from staying comfortable. It doesn't come from making easy decisions. It comes from doing hard things and seeking discomfort, embracing challenges in order to level up, to challenge yourself, to build mental resilience. And what I found with type 1 diabetes, but also life in general, is that the stronger you are mentally, by default, the easier life gets surrounding that. If you can build up your mental fortitude and your ability to embrace challenges, life becomes a game. See, I did not become fearless. I became someone who was scared, but did it anyways. And to the 7-year-old who may be listening, to my past self who absolutely is listening, and to you who are watching, you are capable of so much more than you could ever imagine if you only leaned in to discomfort. And as cheesy as it sounds, your driveway moment could be the start of your Ironman journey. So you don't have to be an Ironman for this to apply. An Ironman to you may be eating pasta for dinner. It may be actually signing up for the health program you've been looking at for months. It may be you actually going to the gym, even though you don't feel confident in your own skin. Your driveway moment is simply you taking the first step that is going to be uncomfortable, I guarantee it, towards your best future self. I'll leave you with this before we wrap up. Your discomfort today builds your freedom in the future. Do hard things now, receive easy things later. Do easy things now, life gets harder later on in the future. The choice is yours. I choose to embrace discomfort. It is a guiding post in my life, and it has served me well. It's not always fun, but it is simple. If you found this one helpful, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. If I had heard this message years ago, I believe that my journey from broken to successful could have been shortened by years. It saved me a lot of heartache. I can't get those years back. I missed out on a lot of memories, a lot of moments. But what I can do is change what I do today. Moving forward, so can you. The past is the past. Let the present and the future be decided by your next actions today. Again, hope this was helpful. I hope you take something from this, learn from my mistakes, my experiences, and hopefully you take one step in the right direction towards the best future you. As always, I want you to keep up the fight. That's why I say it in every episode, because life, every single day, is a battle that you get to choose, whether you participate in with your best self or if you get to sit on the sidelines. It's my belief that the more we stand up to fight, the stronger we get, the more straightforward and simplified life gets as a rule. So, with that being said, happy to have you here. Happy you're still here. And I can't wait to see where life takes you with every action that you take every day. So, we'll see you guys in the next episode. If you haven't yet and you like this kind of stuff, feel free to hit the subscribe button. We'd love to see more of you. And let me know in the comments, what's one hard thing you'd like to commit to? You write it down, you're more likely to complete it. I know you can. And have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.